Hey there, Craig here, Subtle Energy Mechanics. Of course, you know this because you probably clicked on a link or sent me a message saying Yawn Yoga. So I'm making this video specifically for those of you who feel like maybe you're at the end of what you can try. That somehow, if you're the image I got yesterday was there's an elephant sitting on your face. And the only thing that matters is you figure out how the heck to get out of bed. The people that I work with most are doctors, nurses, other professional healers. You've already had this calling, and there's been some kind of elephant that snuck in and like is sitting on you, and you can't do the work you're here to do. You may not even be able to make it till tomorrow. And I can slow down when I say that because it's true. And to give you some of the glimmers of some of the stories of people I've worked with, other doctors and nurses, when we slow down enough to really hear the chaos that you are in from day to day, and maybe just surprised that you're making it through to the next day. And the things that you've tried may have tipped the needle a little bit, but inside you've got some kind of suspicion that there's got to be more. There's got to be another way to actually reconfigure the things on the inside to get the immune system working, to get the energy resources working, to get your mind working again, to help this thing come back to life. And I'm making this video because I've seen that. I saw it with myself first and foremost. 18 years ago when I first came across this work, and I wasn't nearly as bad off as many of you. But I had a kind of a revolutionary healing, revolutionary for me because I was my head down and I just was going, um and I won't go too much into my own story, but after working with somebody for a very short period of time, I noticed myself coming back to life, but from the inside out, almost like that thing that is supposed to live through me hadn't been able to gain access to me, if that makes sense. So I was waking up every day just feeling like, oh my God, I'm alone in this body and I'm alone in this world. And why the hell am I here? And then so there wasn't even really any impulse for me to try to heal myself because then I would just have more energy, but still alone on the inside. I couldn't have used those words then, but it wasn't until somebody barely touched me and did something with his energy field or mine that I felt something come back into me, felt life to come back in and through me. And that was quite amazing. And then it was a long road from there. But once that switch had been found and flipped, I felt there was that internal sense of purpose and reason, and oh my God, this actually can happen. I could feel the end. I could feel the end in sight, even though it was far off. I could feel the end in sight. So it's what I've seen now that I've been doing this work for a long time. But just in the last few years, I've worked with more and more people, providers usually, who have just been taken down by either chronic fatigue or this long COVID, and oftentimes it's both. And as you may have heard me mention in a YouTube video, is that the long COVID seems to have a preference for people on the autism spectrum or neurodivergent. So I'm not going to go into this. Isn't going to be a philosophical talk. This is going to be a nuts and bolts, step by step, what you can do with this Yawn yoga. Yawn yoga. I'm a yoga instructor. I've taken a number of different classes. There was no class called Yawn yoga. This was just an invention of my own, but there's a reason why I put those two words together. And we could just start yawning now, which I'm going to encourage you to do throughout this talk. Okay. And this is going to be a bit longer than the ones that I put on YouTube because I'm making it for you who are at the end, maybe at the end of your rope, and you want to understand enough and really have a practice. You're ready to dive in and do something and just cross your fingers as you're diving in, hoping this is going to work. So the yawn, we're gonna break it down here in a little bit. We're gonna do this today. We're gonna break it down and we're gonna play with it a bit. And in the experience of the yawn, there's hidden this multidimensional, hyperdimensional, non-dual portal that creates a state change. And that's important with this work. The result of finding the state change, maintaining the state change, in other words, like finding yourself in the middle, standing on a teeter-totter or a seesaw. We got to find our way to the middle and then have to learn to balance it. That's step 2. Finding it is step 1, balancing it is step 2, and then taking it on a tour is step 3. That's what we're doing today. Those are the main 3 steps, and you can write it down. I've got lots of notes here that are in too small handwriting, but I'll show you what I wrote at the bottom for you. And if you want to take notes, that's great. And here's my doctor handwriting. First, number 1 is find the switch. Okay. Number 2 is balance it. And number 3, we're going to take it on tour. All right. And I can show you again in a while. You want to write those things down. But the stuff that we're going to do today is going to fall under those 3 categories. And that's what, when I'm working with my one-on-one clients, this is what we're doing. And when you see people, and I'll drop a video here, as maybe you have seen in other videos where I'm working with somebody and you're seeing the energy moving through their spine. Now, what that energy is life energy, is chi, is prana, is kundalini, is the innate intelligent energy that's building you. So we need to talk a little bit about what you are and what you're not. So part of this work is the intelligence that's out here everywhere loses access to you and to your nervous system when something happens, when you get stuck, when a trauma happens, or maybe it's a vaccination or a spike protein, I don't know. But something triggers your body into fight, flight, freeze. Fight, flight, freeze stretches the spinal cord, stretches it. And for you doctors, you can look up AMCT, adverse mechanical spinal cord tension. It's a neurosurgeon, Dr. Alf Bragg. You don't need to know that, but there's some of the mechanics of it. Many of the other energy approaches or nervous system regulating approaches still are aiming to get at a root cause. They're still aiming to get to the inside and disrupt and reorganize what's going on the inside. If they don't have a non-dual, a mystical, energetic component to the work, they're missing the point. You cannot willfully do this, just like you cannot willfully stop your heart. Who can willfully stop your heart? Whatever the intelligence is in there that's managing your heart. So we have to access that intelligence. And that's where we're going to find the switch. Okay. I'm going to pause for a second, and we're going to just feel into the yawn as I recollect what it is that I've been saying. Okay. So the yawn, we're going to slow down. And I want you to, if you got your eyes open, you can look at me, you can just softly watch my face, you can watch my posture. You can also, if you're really highly sensitive, as I suspect many of you are, you can just kind of look around me and watch and feel what I'm doing. I'm slowing down. Now, I cannot make myself yawn. I can put myself in a readiness state so that the yawn comes. I can get so good at it that it feels like I'm making myself yawn. but it's really an invitation and then a get yourself into a readiness state to receive it. Now the yawn subtly pushes on that spinal cord, which is the lower central nervous system. And it pushes it in a rhythmic sort of way. Yoga means union, means taking from fragmentation to defragmentation. It's the union, and yoga is not this union, but it is how does the world feel as it's now coming back together and you were finding yourself awake in this creation. It's in the now, because where else would it be? When else would it be? Yawn as a portal from fight, flight, freeze, disconnected, fragmented, isolated, dying, through the portal where something actually comes back and brings you back to life. And if you're a doctor, you recognize that we were trained at what we can do to the other people to reduce the suffering. But we weren't ever trained in the mechanics of how to invite the thing that brings us back to life. And if we were, when we recognize those therapies or approaches that we have used that have worked, somehow stabilized the body so that that intelligence could come through. Okay. But if you've got that fight, flight, or freeze going, that's that frozen part of the nervous system that needs to be softened in a very specific way by that innate intelligence that's building you, that one that actually grows the plant towards the sun when everything else may be collapsing around it. Entropy, what is it that increases the complexity of an organism? What is the intelligence that increases the complexity of you when the rest of the world is trying to pull you down? This practice is aligning with that intelligence, finding it, and then staying with it, and then taking it on a tour specifically through your central nervous system. When you find it, you stay with it, you take it on a tour, it recognizes that you're in fight or flight. It recognizes that that's not optimal for you, and it starts to rewire you. That's the best way I can explain it based on all of these seemingly miraculous healings that I've witnessed. I didn't do them. I was able to find a way out and through my training to talk people through it. Okay. So let's go back into the yawn. Now I'm going to look at my notes here, see where I am. Okay. So we're going to start with number one, the switch. Looking for the switch. And by the switch, I'm indicating where we go in. If we can slow down enough that I start to be breathed. Here's me breathing. So the switch is when you switch from breathing to being breathed. If you think about a yawn is breathing you, right? It is a reflexive, but what if it's not reflexive? What if it's some kind of intelligence as it's moving through you, and that we have been de-animating it by just thinking of it as a reflex or as a mechanism? And what if that's what's part of what's killing you? If we bought into the assumption that this isn't animate. So if we just suspend that belief, we entertain the belief that maybe the yawn is some kind of moving intelligence that's using our body to feel this thing that's happening. And if we actually turn towards it, match its speed, which usually means we need to slow down, feel down through the belly, down into the pelvis. And by feel, I mean looking, internally looking down. Then I'll wait for a second. If I wait for a second, part of me is going to want to breathe. So that'll just be the some kind of instinctual need for this thing to keep itself alive. So And that gets us to number two. We'll go back and forth between number one and number two. Number one is finding the switch where this thing is wanting to breathe me. I could feel it starting to push up. So it's that same intelligence when you're riding a bike, that thing that actually wants to reflexively steer towards balance. It wants to steer you towards balance. This one wants to steer you towards breathing. Now, number two is the balance point. Because you may get glimpses of being breathed. But the balance point is the being breathed moves. So just like we're balancing a broomstick here on our hand. When you find it, there's not a lot of reward there. The reward with balancing a broomstick is being able to find that balance point, always noticing that we're falling off and recover. With the breath, when the breath is finding us, how do we play with our focus internally? Up into the throat and then back down through the spine. I'm just taking a tour, which actually gets us to number three, taking a tour down through the spine. Now I know that you might go, wait, I don't know what the switch is yet. I don't know what the balance point is, and you're already on to number three, Craig. That's all right. Because practicing with number three might actually help you get number one and get number two. So we're just going to cycle around through it here. So number one is, where's the switch? Where does that thing want to come into me that wants to start yawning me? That's the switch. I found it. Great. I know what it feels like to start to yawn. That means you're already successful at this. So if you're thinking like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to get it, you've been yawning since you were in the womb. So I'm going to turn off the lights behind me here. Is that better? Okay. Now I'm totally washed out. Okay. Hey, look at that. I'm inflamed again. Okay. Where? So now I've walked off, got in my head, I'm being recorded. Where did it go? So my job then is to find the switch again. Okay. And then I'm taking it down. And we'll talk about what to do with the inhale and what to do with the exhale in a minute. But the balance is once I find that the switch was like, oh, there it is. That's the yawn pushing on me a little bit. And what I do in yoga, it's called kumbhaka or kumbhaka, where there's just a subtle pushing back. It's like playing push hands with somebody. If you're pulling away, you're going to lose their hand. If you're pushing too hard, there's no dance. So where's that sweet spot where you could feel it coming in and you're just pushing it enough so you could stay in contact with the yawn that's coming up. And as it gets to the top, don't drop it off and go back into your head or get distracted somewhere else, because you can follow it back down. You can follow once that energy and the pressure has come up through the spine, the spinal cord to the top. Then there's this like expanded floatyville. You're like a feather doing this. You can do this. And so you're using your focus to track where in your system you can feel it all the way down. And then all the way up. Okay. The yawn can be huge, like out of 10. It can be a full stretch out of 10, like, whoa, it's a lot of energy. You don't have to go there. You can go a yawn at a 0 is just non-existent. You're like, I'm just sitting here breathing and nothing's happening. But what happens if you yawn at a 1 or a 2 or a 3 or a 4 and you find just a little bit of that pressure coming at you? And when we're kids, and nobody's looking, we're like, I'm going to take this yawn all the way to the end. It's like an orgasm, and then you're like, "Oh, I'm out." But if you think of it similar to an orgasm and you just want to build it up to a four, and then you back it off, come back down. Okay. So that's what I mean by the balance point, finding the balance point and staying with it. Just staying in one of, and you can write this next thing down. Wake up in the space out. Wake up in the space out. And you can just replay this if you need to write it down. But in my course, that's one of the things that I stress is sometimes we're yawning, we just space out, but we really don't pay much attention to what it feels like to be in that space out. I want to give you something else that you can write down here. The yawn goes bottom to top and top to bottom. Those are two of the four ways it goes. Bottom to top, and then top back down to bottom. The other two ways it goes are out and then in being way in. If we aren't actually just separate three-dimensional human bodies, but we are in some kind of quantum world where there's wormholes and entanglement, that how far out does it go? Infinity. But how far in does it go? From that quantum point of view, it goes to infinity. Some of us are naturally oriented towards finding ourselves outwards. You'll actually feel yourself drop in and connect to everything by going outwards. The other component of us, being just separate individuals, go inward. This color is bothering me. Is that any better? Sorry. Okay. The other component of us goes inward, where you can look way in millions of light years inward. You can just play with those two things, top to bottom and bottom to top, and out and in. These are some of the tactics you can use to achieve the strategy of waking up in the space out. Waking up in the space out. From a bigger point of view, should you figure out how to survive this chronic fatigue thing or the long COVID thing, what is the bigger picture of like why it is that you're here? Where is the human race going? Is it just an accident that we're all here? Or are we actually evolving towards something, towards some experience where, from one point of view, this is a practice in dissolving the boundaries. Dissolving the boundaries towards what end, so that we can actually merge with everything. If you look at where we are with technology these days, that we are in the process of dissolving boundaries. And we do that first with our technological way of like with Instagram and Zoom and what we're doing here. And then we find a way to recreate in our nervous system what we've been able to do with our tools. So this is Kundalini awakening or enlightenment. We've had an intuitive sense, like look at how popular Harry Potter is and Star Wars is, and the story of getting a black belt or Zen enlightenment. What is that story? It's the story of the big mind shedding the body. The mind coordinating itself enough into space where it can stabilize itself enough in these relationships between all the points in space where the body actually can step back and there can be a relationship between body and big mind, but you can be awake in both. That's further down the line. If you were still really struggling with this chronic fatigue, forget what I just said. Okay. So now we've talked a bit about finding the switch. There, the switch. And balancing it. Being able to stay with it. One of the ways that we're doing that is following it bottom to top, top to bottom. Following it in, then out. Notice how we're adding a component of our focus to the sensation of the yawn. And we're building, what we're actually doing is building our synesthetic, like synesthesia is when you have two or more senses that are combined to make some kind of experience that you can't really explain with our language. That is a critical part in starting to dissolve the boundaries so that the energy can then start to reorganize itself inside of you to bring you from that back from the edge of what feels like death. Because the energy, you're not out of energy, but it's so discoordinated and fragmented that it's like you're a boat and you've got holes in the boat. And so you're there holding on for dear life as the water goes out. Now, energy in the yogic world, there's five koshas, and we'll just look at those like five different frequencies. Many of the people that I work with actually have this like these, maybe they're called kriyas or kundalini moving all through them, and they're jerking all over the place. So they have tons of energy. You may have tons of energy, but you can't get out of bed. You're exhausted. You're sick. You put something in your mouth and you react to it for 2 weeks because you're exhausted. And so how does that make sense that you're moving all over the place? So it's not that you're lacking energy. It's that energy doesn't know how to coordinate itself in such a way as to feel exactly where you are and exactly what you need and to serve those needs so that you feel relaxed, feel content, feel fed, feel held, feel loved and safe, thinking clearly. And then you have so much energy and inspiration that you're inspired to you know where you're going, you know what you're here to do, and you're being moved along. That you're so in touch with that energy that's coming up and breathing you. It's what needs to breathe you and move you into why it is that you're here and what you're here to do. But you got to figure out how to not die first. And the way to not die is the very first kosha. So the five koshas, that energy that breathes you and moves you. It has different voltages. So it breaks itself up into five different frequencies, from low frequency to higher frequency, from low level of complexity to higher level of complexity. So if you're up here shaking all over the place, but you don't have access to this very first kosha, this very first frequency, and that's the frequency that moves through the yawn, which is why we're doing yawn yoga. If you don't have access to this very first frequency, kosha, that's the frequency that moves through you and moves slowly through your connective tissues, finds the holes in the boat and fills the holes in the boat. First priority, fill the holes in the boat. Stop the sinking. Okay. And where's the sinking? Where's the boat? For most of us, it's somewhere between the brainstem and the bottom of the spinal cord. So at the bottom of the spine there. Now the yogis have this figured out, right? We just have lost our way in this culture. We figured out how to build things, which is moving forward, like drive, that's second kosha, build things and put them all together. That's third kosha, have a bigger picture. Like I want all of this. I want the mansion. I want I want the property. I want the boat. And that's, bigger picture. That's fourth kosha. And then what are we? We're isolated. We're raping the planet. We're raping ourselves. We don't see ourselves as connected to everything. We don't actually see that what we're doing out there, we're doing to ourselves. And that connection, that deep energetic coming home is what moves through us. But if we outrun it, we disconnect from it, and then the boat starts popping holes. So feeling, again, we're going to find the switch. And this happens clearly, watching this and I forget, I get talking. And then what do I have to do? I have to come back to where's the switch? There. But the switch, the yawn moves, it wants to move through the entire system. One of the issues with the fight, flight, freeze is it contorts us, which prevents that first kosha from making it through the entire length of the spinal cord, which is why number 3 it's called taking it on a tour. It has to tour the road that it's designed for, which goes bottom sacrum all the way up through the chakras and to the top. And as it goes through all the chakras open like a flower and then close like a flower, and open like a flower and close like a flower. So we don't actually have to go focus on any one chakra. They take care of themselves, just like flowers do. We keep the flower watered. The way you keep your flower watered is yawning through the whole thing, and then moving back down, up, down, out, in. Okay. Taking it on a tour. This is called Dirga Pranayama for any of you want to know. And the Dirga Pranayama just means there's 3 positions that you breathe into. And this happens to coincide with generally the 3 branches of the vagus nerve. So we're tying in, yes, vagal technology, vagal tone, and how can we use our attention and the breath and the focus and our posture to support vagal tone fixing itself, rather than us forcing it to do something which will just increase the fight, flight, freeze. So we want to actually help it find itself and help to regulate better. Okay. So this is really critical. This actually saved my ass just last week when I got triggered, and then I got triggered more, and I was in a full fight, flight, freeze panic thing. Happens. And I was like, all right, Craig, well, now's your opportunity to try out your own words. And and I did. And those of you who know what it feels like to be in fight, flight, freeze, are like, you don't have clarity of mind. You've got to keep it simple. And so my simple was remember Dirga Pranayama, which is I take one breath, I start the yawn here. And what am I doing when I start the yawn? I can put my hand here, but I'm actually feeling all of this right here, because it goes up into the throat, up above the heart. Heart's here. We're actually going to breathe up here. And I check to see, can the yawn come into there? And I'm just going to do it with one breath. I'm going to watch it, because I'm watching the yawn like it's a little puppy or a cat, to see, does it like to come up into there, or was it kind of like struggling and make me feel like I'm not quite sure it's real happy there. But I'm watching the yawn as though it's something separate, and I'm watching it try to get in there because it's breathing me. Remember, I found the switch. And now once I find the switch and it's trying to yawn me, how well can it yawn when I'm asking it to come in here? I'm using my focus, inviting it here. And this is really critical. Just using my focus, being effortless, just trying to aim the yawn here, not down to the belly. Just a bit here. And I feel like it's getting in there about 60%. Okay, then I'm going to take my fingers off, and then right around the sternum comes down, the bottom of the sternum is a little pokey out of here. It's called the xiphoid process. Well, as you doctors know that. Diaphragm, this general area. I'm going to invite the yawn here. And immediately I can realize, like, oh man, that yawn is it's way happier to get going here. Like I've noticed, like my whole belly just went like on its own. I'm just letting my balance point. Remember, that's number 2. So as I just pretend like my balance point is here, like I'm balancing a broomstick. I'm just like, okay, where's the balance point here? And it breathes all on its own. Okay, awesome. This one wins so far between these 2. Now I'm going to go down to my belly button, a little below my belly button. Button. Okay, down into here. Okay. That one, not as strong. Might have been because I was like trying not to push my freaking belly out to you guys. I'll try it again. I do notice that I had that second push. And there again, so that's a positive sign. I know from listening to Andrew Huberman talk. He talks about that breathing with the, I don't remember what they call it. There's a double bump that really helps with state change. And that is something that we're watching for, is state change. But that tells me that there's still something, some kind of resistance that's coming up. The yawn itself is coming up against, and then it needs to reconfigure, and then it bumps past it, which is good, but it doesn't feel as connected as this one here. Yeah. Yeah, this one is just the best. Okay, so now I've assessed all three. Okay, so I want you to do that. You can even write it down. Which one was easier, right? And this is like touring through a jungle. You walk in there and you look around and you watch to see the yawn as though it's a wild animal. And what is it doing? Is it come in here or does it not? Or does it kind of? And this is going to be a turning point for many of you. Many of you are going to stay in your head and you're not going to do this. And those of you who are actually at the end, actually, you've got nothing else that you have ready to try, and this has to work. This is a critical part. You have to suspend disbelief and pretend and play with the yawn and watching it as though it's actually giving you valid information when it has a hard time coming in, rather than it being a reflection on you just aren't doing it well. You just couldn't get the yawn up there. You shouldn't be able to. You shouldn't be able to. The yawn is actually maybe more intelligent than that. There's a reason why the yawn's not coming here. And if you try to force it here, you're going down the road that you may have gone down however many times you have in the past, and you are triggering part of the vagus nerve to continue to be activated to keep you in that sympathetic dominant fight, flight, freeze state. It's that little tiny belief, misbelief that is you should be able to bring breath here. The yawn is just a reflex. It's not actually intelligent. Let's correct that belief for just a minute. Let's pretend that the yawn is more intelligent. Yeah, 30%. Immediately, you can see it in my eyes. I can feel it coming in. Let yourself feel yourself get drunk. And for you, it might be here. For you, it might be down here in that third lower position. And in yoga, there's names for these things. Doesn't matter. Just as long as you know, does the yawn come in here? Does the yawn come in here? Does the yawn come down here? Now that's not, can I get a big breath in here? Can I get a big breath in here? Can I get a big breath down here? Because if you're doing that, you've skipped number one and number two, which is find the switch. Does the yawn come here? And then you have to wait for it. You cannot outpace the yawn. The yawn moves at its own speed. If you're not waiting for it, you're using effort. You're shutting it down. Because you can never heal yourself. The innate intelligence, that thing that keeps you alive all night long while you're sleeping, is the thing that's actually going to heal you all day long while you're awake as well. So your ability to connect with that innate intelligence, that might be what this last hurdle is for you before you actually turn this big boat. Okay. Okay. Now there's ways to develop this breath exercise much further, places to go with this. But today, figuring out, can you find that switch? And then how quickly do you lose it? Do you find it again, which is why you're balancing it? Where did it go? Where did it go? Fuck everything else. Don't let yourself get distracted. And when you do get distracted, just come back. Now, next step, once I have found, for me, it's this position right around here, right around the diaphragm. I'm feeling it coming in, but I'm also watching myself become aware way out. And I can become aware way in. I'm actually kind of going into this like imagination space, which is also dream state, which is also trance state, which is also waking up in the space out. I'm paying attention out here, and then I'm paying attention in here. And it's what you do all day long. When you're walking, what the heck is keeping you up and balanced? And you're walking and you're talking. How are you keeping contact with the concept that you're chewing on while you're looking and watching for cars, while your body's keeping you upright? This is really complex behavior. So we're just waking up in the thing that's already happening when you're here. Where's the yawn? Slowly following it in. Watch for visuals. Watch for colors. Watch for patterns. Watch for, I'm seeing a tunnel, then I go way out. Then I come back. That big breath would not have happened had I not come back. I would have stayed more disconnected. The point is that switch. That switch is allowing that intelligence to come through and access you. And as I'm just keeping my attention here, and I've done that now for a few minutes, I may breathe into that spot for 2 minutes. To the one spot that you found, breathe into that for 2 minutes. Then, keeping your attention here with your awareness, start it here, the yawn here, and then bring it up through the spine, and then land back in the spot where you feel most at home. And if you're already starting here, you can still bring it up into the top of the head, and then back in here. And then the next one, start the yawn here again, and then down through, bring the yawn down. Instead of yawn up mouth to mouth, bring the yawn down, and I'm focusing specifically where I feel my spinal cord to be. All the way down. Then I can just let it go. Okay. Check my notes, see if there's anything else I want to say. 2, 3. Sorry for hearing all the noise distraction at the bottom. This is a working barn, and the barn part's downstairs for shop. And so there's shop shit happening. Okay. So you may notice that this is something I do throughout my YouTube videos as well, though when I take the time, I go through most of my videos and I clip out my long pauses, but this is how I go through the day. I tend to go into my head, go out into space, and leave myself behind, which means by the time I come back, oftentimes I may be triggered, not aware of how I was feeling, but a disconnection or some kind of badness may have already made some progress. So I will make a ritual of shutting everything out, even the thought that I was thinking of, like, okay, that's a really important thought. I'm going to put you on the shelf, and I'm just tending to hear. I'm pretending like this thing is my little, like I have a little 2-month-old baby I've been holding in my arms, and it's squirming. And in that situation, I'm going to just pay attention to it. Everything else, fuck everything else. Right? And doing that with yourself. As though this is your 2-month-old baby. Here, here, here. And just like you look at a baby and you see life coming through it and radiating out through your eyes, or his or her eyes, you're watching for that same radiation to come out of here, or here, or here. And many of us know how to feel that, but then we don't, that's which is finding the switch. But many of us don't know the anatomy and the physiology of how it moves. And if you don't know the anatomy and physiology of how it moves through your system, you're not going to be able to achieve number 2, which is balancing it. And if you can't balance it, your body is still going to be dysregulated. Your energy is still going to be dysregulated because it then hasn't made the critical 3rd step, which is helping it take a tour through the entire central nervous system, especially brainstem to coccyx and back. And if you can't do that, that fight, flight, freeze stays in place, continues to loop because it's a complex, which means it's stable in many different situations, pattern. It's a complex pattern that's stable. So the only way we are going to destabilize it is by using our design, which is as we're designed to be able to do something with our focus, with our posture, with our breath and attention to be able to find and then connect with that thing that's trying to keep us alive. And this has been, I'm thinking of a half a dozen people who I've worked with in the last year or year and a half who've been completely taken down by long COVID or chronic fatigue. And we're at the end, and every single one of them is like, I'm back. I'm back to life. And it didn't involve coming in and fixing something. The one thing that was the through line for every single one of them was helping them find the switch, helping them maintain or balance the switch so they could hold on to it long enough, and then learned how to bring it down and bring it back up. Now, this gets to be more complex, especially if there's a big trauma in the past. Um, if you're so challenged that you can't maintain focus, again, this is something that you can do on your own. But when I got as bad, when I was in my bad place, I couldn't do this on my own. The people I've worked with can't do this on their own. And so our nervous system is designed as pack animals, right? And what that means is our nervous system actually becomes more stabilized when there are two two people's focus on it. So if it feels like you might be that severe and you want to hop on a call with me, that's fine. Reach out, send me an email. I'm happy to hop on a call and we can talk about whether or not that might be the case for you, whether it would make sense to work with me one-on-one or in a group or with some other person that does this type of non-dual yoga informed work. Okay, happy to do that. The people that I work with, this is their practice. Because when you see the videos of me doing something, they're not just lying there dormant. They're connecting to where the switch is, they're following where the yawn is going, and they're moving with it. But they're moving with it by design, and the design of how that yawn intelligence, the Kundalini prana chi moves, is in a wave up and down through the spinal cord. And that wave is more stabilized to perform its fluid wave-like behavior when it's held in a really clear mental container, which put you on the table and do some.
Yeah.
Which we'll do
Do
that too.
now.
Okay, do that now.
Bye.
Bye. See you. Okay. Okay, let's do some practice. You're dropping in to your own body and your own breath, and you're paying attention inside. As soon as you start to pay attention inside, you're noticing that she's also paying attention inside. And as soon as she does and she notices my focus on her, she doesn't even notice my focus on her. She's just trying to track and allow the yawn to come up and do what it does. So she's not even specifically aware of where my attention is. And to be clear, I'm not trying to manipulate her like a marionette puppet. That's what it looks like when we get stuck in the overly dualistic point of view. But what I'm doing with my fingers is basically playing in a holographic etch-a-sketch. I'm drawing imaginary lines, kind of like building a magnifying glass through which the light comes, through which this energy comes. And that magnifying glass starts down there at the sacrum, right there at the tailbone, and she can feel it waking up. And then where it wants to go is moving like a wave up through the lumbar spine, through the diaphragm, behind the heart, upper thoracics, through the cervical. Notice that the energy and information goes through each chakra. And I'm not pulling anything out. I'm not putting anything in. All I'm doing is using my focus and my imagination to build this imaginary energetic Tupperware container or tube that moves around her spine. And energy passes through that container. Now, another point of clarification here. I've chosen Megan as a demo because she's a professional acrobat. She has a lot of professional time moving her body in acrobatic ways, which makes her a really good demo for this type of work. But what I want you to notice, there's a couple different koshas that are happening here, and you don't need to know what that means, but what I want to highlight here is these big muscle movements, these big spinal motions are not required. In fact, I would recommend against them. What I recommend instead is to watch underneath those big motions for the big breath. When she pauses, and I'll wait here, and we can sit here and we can wait for it. Okay, there comes the movement. Now we're going to want to see a breath come in behind it. Here it comes. There's the breath, right? So it kind of sneaks up underneath it. There's a large muscle movement that like loosens the spine. Then we need to have the breath that brings the safety through. The breath is what defragments. The breath is what brings you back home. The breath is what plugs the holes in the boat, if you will. And that's why I'm going nice and slow here. And there's the breath, but there's also the second kosha, which is a bigger stretch. So it's not an ideal model, but it gives you an idea. And what I want you to really focus on is the breath coming up and down through the spine, and be open to the possibility that somebody else's focus can help that breath find you and bring safety through you. Not manipulate you, but help you find your own safety. It's actually best held with two people. So you can do this with your significant other, a good friend, or a healer in case your situation is that dire. So, all right. Thanks for taking the time and giving this to yourself. And I'd love to know, in the comments from this, your results and questions that you have. And I